Hi there, I'm Aaron Wilder, and I curated the Amos Eno Gallery exhibition, A Long Train, 250 Years of Hypocrisy on Artsy.net. And joining me is artist John Francis Peters. John, thanks so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
I thought we could talk a little bit about declarations. A declaration is an explicit expression of feeling or commitment, implying boldness and clarity. It doesn't just describe reality, but it actually creates one. What, if anything, does your work declare?
I tried to be a commitment to critical thinking, specifically utilizing visual communication, visual art. I think that it's about questioning conditioning and perception via the conditioning we go through in whatever nation state we live in. But in this country, it's I started recognizing that in my youth, actually, when I first went to public school, and I was like, we're forced to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and I for whatever reason, my whether it was my family or my community, I was questioning that at that point. That's something that's embedded within me. With these works, I guess they're an extension of that in some sense, where I'm continuing to push myself to look at different dimensions to our country and the history and such. Specifically with these works, it's about the violence that I feel, and obviously we see or experience throughout the landscape in which we are part of. These works, the Untitled US Day works, were partially in response to the mass shootings going on. I don't remember if there was a specific one when I made these works exactly, but for me, this idea of this, how this country came about, it's that violence I think believe resonates here in its different forms. And I think as an artist, using this type of approach, mixed media, I'm always looking for ways to tap into those other dimensions of our shared reality and speak about like that violence that I feel is within the landscape and within us.
Yeah, it's a major topic for sure. These two works in particular really look at gun culture
Hmm.
in the US, and they have a particular sort of time frame feel to them, but unfortunately, gun culture is timeless.
Hmm.
Particularly, it feels very prominent now, but it has been for a while.
Yeah, I actually did a series of photographs that were where I went to these gun ranges out in the desert of Nevada and Arizona mostly. And I was studying gun culture in those places. Originally, I'm from upstate New York, and I grew up around hunting in the woods growing up and such. But then I wanted to explore this idea later in life. It's a strange phenomenon where it becomes where it's like violence becoming normalized in all these different ways. Yeah, and then with this particular works, also there were these images of gun culture, but also these other images I had found earlier that, for me, when combined, they created this sort of tension. In one sense, the color images that are centered within the work speak to like mass hysteria, some of which
Mhm.
I've lived through, like 9/11 and other things. And the violence sort of layered over time. So yeah, I mean, these works are about exploring that, and in a way that's maybe not like less literal, but I hope they sort of convey the emotional response that I was feeling to a
Yeah,
degree.
I think
So
particularly with the added textures, it makes it a little bit more evocative.
I think living when I moved out to California, for some reason I felt that, as beautiful as it is here, and we were talking about San Diego, and it is an amazing city and such, but I do feel that there is this sort of uneasiness, this tension in the space, in the landscape here, that is something that I've been exploring with both my photography and my mixed media work. I feel there's a fear, and whether it's like the ground shaking deep beneath us, from the shifting plates, but I believe it's also part of like this country was founded on violence, so the ghost of that that violence, or however you want to put it, it's amongst us, and we have to learn how to navigate it, in our own way, and speak about
Yeah,
it.
sort of
Hmm.
interwoven into our fabric. So let's take a
So,
look at the other work of yours that's in the show, Rule Like a Dictator #2.
hmm.
Donald Trump's face, or multiple versions of his face, are sort of juxtaposed amongst these Greco-Roman symbols,
Hmm.
which makes me think a little bit about Trump's rhetoric criticizing European leaders for letting their cultures be quote unquote ruined by lax immigration policies. What does this work say, connecting the perspectives of the signers of the Declaration to our current times?
I think that with this work I originally made almost like as a warning. I made three images of this series, utilizing his face in different ways, and it was about this distortion of reality that I believe is, I mean, that's part of the equation of what they're doing. But this distorting reality puts tension on the structures of, obviously justice, of like who achieves justice, who receives it. Like for me, it's like it's like a fun house thing. It's like completely trying to flip what's, as we know, truth and fiction and such. So I believe it connects to the Declaration because of independence in a way. Well, in one way, it's very literal. The idea that we shouldn't be governed by a king. And this man trying to obviously be a king. Without you can question anything he does. He's going to do whatever he wants, and that is one way. But also the distortion of, I guess, who achieves equality, who's allowed to be human, who's considered human. Those things I think connect to work. Yeah, it's to me, it's like this distortion of reality is mainly what this work is about. And to me, originally these works were like a warning to viewers. Like
Hmm.
these were made before the election, so I was like, if this can happen again, and it's going to be way worse. The second round, and so I made these works as a warning of such. But here we are with that. So
Well, you mentioned viewers. I was wondering
mhm.
if what sort of conversations have you had with viewers of your work about these kinds of themes?
In the beginning, usually a lot of my works are, the conversations start about, form, aesthetics, which is great. And then with some folks, I will go a little bit deeper into what they're about. And we usually just spiral into conversations about like the madness of today and what's going on, and, where we're headed and how do we stop it and how do we get here. So that's the type of connection I hope to make. I hope that also the works and my work in general, in a larger and a more macro view, are something where, or a place where people can like bridge ideas or meet in conversation, and or sort of develop different forms of empathy. And you know a lot of all these works are also about questioning the illusions and the condition, the illusions of our nation state, and like reconsidering. I think that we have to revisit like who we are. Personally, this is my opinion. Um, revisit it, rethink it, and we might have to go through some really dark moments as we are right now, to achieve that. I think that I don't know what these guys that wrote the Declaration of Independence were. I think it was a bit. It was maybe some of them were, had a good heart. They took out the anti-slavery passage, which was clear indicator that it was maybe more so about business and money. Continuing to allow slavery to exist. So it definitely like just really connects to this right now. It's almost like those evil spirits are amongst us doing the same thing, and I just hope that we can stay united and not allow them to continue to divide us, not just between the left and the right or whatever you want to call it, but also amongst people on the left or on the a lot of it's about like the illusions for me as well, and really pushing myself to think about and perceive differently, and what is perception, what am I conscious of, what am I unconscious of, and how can I make artwork that um, connects emotionally to those broader questions and such. So
Well, thanks so much, John, for taking the time to speak with me. I want
thank
to
you.
remind everyone that Along Train, 250 Years of Hypocrisy, is on display on Artsy through April 4th.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.